Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedCommsNetworking.com. And those are services, activities, resources for people who work in and around the global MedComms community, by which I'm talking people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing. Importantly, lots of resources also for people who would like to know more about MedComms and to get support in getting their career started, their first job, as it were, in medcoms, writing, account management, and so on. You'll find we've collected a load of resource at FirstMedCommsJob.com specifically for you if you're interested in joining the business. There's articles, there's videos, there's all sorts of stuff, events, and we produce now a series of annual careers guides, one of which is a careers guide specifically for medical writers. We have just published the 2021 issue in March. You'll find it, as I say, at FirstMedCommsJob.com. And today, I'm delighted that we've got Cassie and Dani coming along, both of whom have been profiled in that new issue of the Careers Guide. So thank you, Cassie and Dani, for joining us. What we're going to do today is to simply have a discussion. How did you get into medical writing? How are you finding medical writing? What are you doing? What the heck is this job all about? And as I say, hopefully answer some questions from the audience. So I'm going to start by asking both of you to introduce yourself properly, and I'm going to do it in alphabetical order as always. So Cassie, tell us who you are and what you're doing and where you work.
Thank you very much, Peter. So I'm Cassie and I'm a medical writer at Oxford PharmaGenesis. So everything began for me, as it does for most of us, with my undergraduate degree, which was in neuroscience from University College London, UCL. I loved learning about neuroscience, I loved the science, and at the end of it, I didn't really feel like I was ready to give up learning, and I wasn't ready to give up doing research and sort of delving into the unknown, as it were. So I decided to take on a job at UCL again as a research assistant. So I was working there and I did a PhD part-time. My role was researching Alzheimer's disease, and I was looking at the vascular side of the disease and seeing how vascular markers on MRI was related to clinical outcomes for people who have dementia and people who are aging normally. And I really loved the sort of the problem solving, the scientific side, particularly the science communication. But around halfway through my PhD, I started to realize that the academic career path was not for me. And this was really challenging actually to realize, because when you're within academia, it kind of feels like that's the natural path and you can't really see where you can step off that track. And so I started to spend a lot of time thinking about what it was that I actually enjoyed about the job I was doing, and what I was good at and what I wanted to carry on with. And I think one of the things which definitely tied me to my research and tied me to my PhD is the fact that I have a long history with Alzheimer's disease, because my granny had Alzheimer's disease and my parents run a care home for people who have Alzheimer's. So it was really important for me to move into a career where I felt like I would be giving back and doing something which is as worthwhile as researching dementia. So at this point, I've been in London for several years, needed a change, decided to move to Oxford and thought, I've done enough thinking, I've done enough talking to people, it's time to start trying things out. So I started to send emails out to companies I thought sounded interesting, one of which was Oxford PharmaGenesis. And I was so delighted and so grateful when they responded to my request for work experience and asked me to come in for a chat. And at this point, I didn't really know much about medcoms. Part of me wondered if it was mainly sort of sitting in a corner writing manuscripts, not really talking to anyone. And that's not what I'm about, because I love working with people, and I like working on creative projects as well. So that chat went really well, and I found myself in an internship working in a brilliant team. And I did that internship for a couple of months. Then I went away traveling for a few months and came back as an associate medical writer about this time last year. And I've been working on that ever since. I've been loving what I've been doing, and I'm really excited to see where this career takes me. And I really hope we can have a great discussion today. I'm looking forward to talking with the audience as well, and with Dani and Peter. So thanks.
No problem at all. Just give us that flavour of Oxford PharmaGenesis, the top line. How big is it? How many offices have you got? Where in the world are you? Just give us that flavour.
Yeah, sure. So actually, when I started as an intern, there were 250 of us. We just passed that threshold from small to a medium company. But since then, I think we're at about 350 now. So we're growing really rapidly. We've got offices in the UK, in London, Oxford, Cardiff, as well as Cambridge. That's our newest one that's opened. We've also got an office in the US, in Philadelphia. We've got one in Melbourne. We've got one in Basel as well. So it's a very global company. And I'd say the thing that really sets us apart is our focus on really high quality deliverables. We always deliver to the highest quality, and that's how we end up with clients that keep coming back, and we have really great relationships with clients and a diverse client base as well. So yeah, that's
excellent. Excellent. And you're basically a privately owned independent group, aren't you? So
yes.
Okay, no, that's excellent. I just wanted the flavour of the agency, because then Dani, introduce yourself and also just give us that flavour of Ashfield, as it were.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Dani, and I'm a senior medical writer working for Ashfield MedComms, which is a subsidiary of Ashfield Health. For anyone who has been around the medcoms industry for a little bit of while, you might recognise the name, as we went through a recent company rebrand from Ashfield Healthcare Communications, which has been advertised and it went live last month. So in terms of Ashfield MedComms and Ashfield Health, it's a global organisation. We've got offices all over the UK. So I'm based in Manchester, but we also have offices in Macclesfield, London, Maidenhead, Glasgow. We've also got offices in the US and some smaller offices based internationally as well. So again, because of this, global outreach and the size of the organisation, we have a very broad scale and a broad reach in terms of client base and the work that we do with those clients as well. So it's a real global company that works on all things medcoms really. So publications, commercial work, medical affairs work, training, anything really, you name it. Ashfield does it.
Okay, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your own story, yeah?
Yeah, so in terms of my background, I studied in Cardiff University and did a biomedical science undergrad degree, and then I took a year off to do some traveling because I really wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. The plan was to go in to do a PhD, but when I was doing my undergraduate dissertation, I just kind of realized I was just a bit useless in the lab. And funnily enough, my supervisor, when she was reviewing my dissertation, she said, "You're not really built for the lab, Dani, but you're really good at writing." And so I didn't really take anything onto that at the time, because then I decided to take a year off and then went on to do a master's in Warwick, because I just wanted to sort of expand on my qualifications. So that was in medical biotechnology business. So then as I was working through that and now deciding it's sort of really time to start thinking about a career, I sort of remembered what my supervisor had told me and realized that the whole writing side of science and the research and writing up materials about it is where my skills lies and my interest lies. So I basically just turned to Google and put science-based writing jobs into it, and medical writing was one of the ones that popped up. I didn't really know anything about it at the time, but I did some more research online and spoke to some recruiters and read the FirstMedCommsJob journal that you release, Peter, just to get some more background on what the role is, and it really sounded like something that, it sounded perfect really for what my interests were. So as I was coming to the end of my postgrad, I sort of applied to a few companies, and Ashfield Health was the main one that stood out. Ashfield Healthcare Communications at the time of applying, because it was advertising a training program called the Allegro training program, which maybe we can go into a bit more detail of later if someone has some questions on it. But from my research that I had done, it seemed to be the only company that was doing this sort of structured training program, which was designed as a 12-month fast track program from associate medical writer to medical writer. So that was the main selling point for me really, and why when I got invited to an assessment center to do a writing test and group exercises and all the usual things that you do at assessment centers. And when I was ultimately offered the job, why I was so sort of excited to go into the role, because I was sort of a part of this kind of new scheme essentially within MedComms that is 3 years later still going on now. So I joined Ashfield in January 2018, so I've been here for 3.5 years, well, 3.25 years now. And yeah, like Cassie said, I'm really enjoying the role and the development and the fact that I've been here for 3 years now, and I'm still coming across new things, new therapy areas, new projects, new types of deliverables. So you're constantly having to learn and constantly having to adapt to the role essentially.
Excellent. Okay, no, that's fantastic, Dani. And we'll talk about some of those bits that you've both mentioned in a little bit more detail, I guess, as the conversation goes on. But can we sort of start where it starts? And again, so some of what I'm going to keep saying is don't get bogged down in this, okay? But let's cover off some of the aspects. And what I'm more interested in today is talking a little bit about the actual work you do, okay? And we've talked how we can talk about the projects and so on. That's that, and bring that to life, because that's important. But let's just start at the basics, just so that everybody's sort of understanding. And Cassie, I'm going to start with you. Just give us a flavour of the actual process. You talked a bit about how in your case you effectively applied to PharmaGenesis on spec and said, can you take me on for a little bit, give me some experience, sort of thing, which in fairness, internships aren't that common in medcoms. But I think an important point there is there's nothing to stop anybody taking the initiative and contacting a company and saying, can I get involved? And that's often some of the feedback from the agencies is talk to us. But it's very competitive to get into, and a lot of people trying to get in. So let's just think about the basic steps. So as whether you've applied in the way that you've done, as it were, or you're applying via an ad or something, there's a little bit of a process we can talk generically about. It's almost certain you're going to get a writing test, for instance, okay, as a medical writer. Okay, so just talk a little bit, let's not go into a lot of detail, writing tests, interview, just give us a little flavor of how that works at PharmaGenesis, or certainly in your experience anyway.
Yep, of course. So I can speak from my own experience, and I can also sort of talk about a little bit more about a more generic path into Oxford PharmaGenesis as well. So obviously in my case, I applied, I reached out for an internship rather than applied. And then when it was clear that we were both interested in me carrying on, we then went through kind of the normal process. So I still had to do a writing test, and then we still had not an interview, but sort of feedback on that writing test as you would in an interview. But the way that it works for most people applying is, I know that you initially send an email to our HR team with a CV and covering letter. And then some recruits are asked to do a writing test, and the writing test, it may have changed since I did it, but for me, I had to write an abstract based on a very poorly written, nonsensical, almost article. And that was one half of the writing test. And the other half of the writing test was to write a newspaper, sort of New Scientist style little piece about that piece of research. So I found I really enjoyed doing the kind of newspaper style sort of that kind of article. Almost sort of once had the idea, almost wrote itself, but the abstract was a bit more challenging. I think that's because I had to really go into that paper and understand what they were trying to achieve with it, and it was kind of purposefully difficult to understand. But there's a lot of resources out there, I know, to help with the writing test. So once you've sort of submitted that, that's kind of reviewed internally, and I think you're then asked to come in for an interview and go through that writing test, also go through your CV, and also have a chance to speak with some of the people in the team as well, separate from the interview. So I've had the opportunity to have a chat with candidates as well, and that's an opportunity for them to talk to you, find out what it's like in the team, and also, you know, for the team members to get a feel for kind of the potential newbie as well. So,
okay. And I think I'm right in saying, yeah, I think I'm right in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but PharmaGenesis is one of the companies that is taking on people all the time. So
yeah.
there's no sort of single or regular cohort that comes in. They're just looking and they take people on as they find them, sort of thing. Yeah, is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of bespoke to the candidate, and we are recruiting at the moment. We're growing very rapidly. Yeah, so
okay. That's cool. That's cool. And on the writing test front, I mean, it's worth making the point to people, because otherwise we'll get questioned. You know, different agencies have different approaches, different sorts of writing tests. You know, there's no one size fit all. We can't just come up with, we can't sit here today and go, this is the writing test, and by the way, this is the answer, because it's all different in different places. Okay. The important points, which you sort of covered off, is the sort of thing you expected to do is maybe take some information, take it and put it into a different sort of format. So the words to hear are, you know, write appropriately for an audience, get the key message, put it in the right way, to follow the brief. That's the most important thing, because in my experience, medcoms agencies aren't trying to catch people out. If they say write 500 words, a newspaper saying write out 500 words for nurses, they don't want you to show how clever you are by writing 2,500 words that only the top opinion leaders will understand, because you've missed the point. Yeah. So some generic stuff there. Dani, I'm going to ask the same question, but in your case at Ashfield, there will be a slightly different approach there. So just a little bit, not too much, but just a little bit about the approach from Ashfield, because there you have got a more formalized sort of program, the Allegro program. So just say a few words about that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so from my experience, I don't think it's changed a huge amount since I did it. So it's, you know, your standard online application, and then you have an initial call with someone at the company to just gauge your interest in the role, and then the next step is I guess it's a recorded video interview, which I don't know if anyone has done one before, where there's a series of questions that pop up on the screen, and then you have sort of a countdown and then a minute to give your answer. Definitely the worst part of the whole process. It's very strange speaking to yourself and then dressing up just for an interview when you're sitting in your kitchen and not actually speaking to anyone. But those recordings get reviewed, and then there's moving on to the assessment center process, where, similar to what Cassie said, of course, there's a writing test. The one that we did is a little bit different. So you get given a publication with the abstract missing, and then you have to write the abstract based on the data and the information that's in the publication. So I guess the main objective is that can you identify the key points and the key takeaways that have been included within the paper. And also there's group exercises on the day, and then of course your standard interviews. So the assessment centers are a great day, really. They're obviously really daunting at first, but everyone there is in the same position, and as you sort of go through the day, you get to know each other, and it really, you sort of relax and you ease into the position. So as I say, in terms of the Allegro program, I think we recruit 4 times a year, but don't quote me on that. And yeah, there's a general target essentially for how many people that how many associate medical writers are going to take in each time, and it varies slightly depending on the number of applications and the potential number of good candidates. So I think the smallest intake we've had has been around 10 to 12 people, and then I think up to 20 has been the highest. So And as I say, it's a quarterly intake really. But
and sorry, I'm cutting across you, but you come into, I think I'm right in saying it's like an 8-week program, and then and everyone goes through their 8-week program, and then they're sort of put out to the different agency or business groups and given the experience. And in essence, it's a year's program. I'm trying to simplify things a bit here, but you come in as an associate medical writer. Yep. You're on a year's program with the expectation is that you move on from there, but that's quite a formalized and that sort of systematic approach of bringing in groups and so on, which I think is an interesting contrast to Cassie. Again, let's just make the point. We've got 2 agencies here, not 10. There are lots of different approaches here, but one of the points that I like to try and get across to people who are thinking about medcoms is to understand that the different agencies work in different ways, okay? And there are formalized training programs and there are very unformalized. You know, unformalized, that's not bad, that's not a good word, is it? But you know what I mean. Okay, right, okay, which is absolutely fantastic. Okay, we've got a question which has come in, which is impossible to answer, whoever anonymous is. I've been fortunate enough to get an AMW, so associate medical writer, within the last day for a small agency based in Oxford. What advice would you give for the first week in terms of what to aim for? Now that's impossible really without knowing exactly your circumstances, anonymous, but let's try and rephrase the question a little bit. And Cassie, I'm going to go back to you. I'm not going to just go backwards and forwards like this, but let's just keep this going. Cassie, when you walked in in that first week, just give us a sense of what you got up to and how you found it coming from the background. Was it just meeting expectations? Was it different? What were the challenges? What was it like to be in there in that first week or so? If you can remember that back.
Yeah, certainly. So I remember my first day very clearly because I was actually enrolled on a training that day, and the training was voice coaching training. And I was doing voice coaching training with some of my new colleagues, and it was really fun actually. It was run by an actor, and we're doing all sorts of interesting exercises, like the kind of exercises you do in drama classes and voice voice exercises and things like that. So that was quite an interesting thing to be doing on the first day in front of your new colleagues, because there's a lot of silly tongue twisters and things like that. So that was definitely not what I was expecting, but I really loved it. And then I think the first week I spent just trying to understand what the team was, what their kind of main book of work was, who were their clients, and asking lots of questions about that, and kind of not feeling like there were any kind of stupid questions, to try and really get to grips with that, what they're trying to kind of achieve in the day-to-day. And so chatting with everyone and starting to learn what my new colleagues were like, and going out for lunch and things like that. So
okay, and an obvious question, coming as a medical writer, when did you start writing?
When did I start writing? I think I started writing in like the first, I think it was on day 2, first day, about learning about what I was doing, learning about the account, doing this voice coaching training. The second day I think I was tasked with doing kind of a communication, short comms piece about an update to something, a sort of very short, very punchy style communication. And I had kind of quite a bit of time given to me for that, so that I could really understand what it was that I was trying to communicate, and who the audience were, and lots of examples of previous comms as well to look at as well.
Okay, and if I can draw out a couple of important points there, you were, I mean, within days, you were working on live projects, which is an important point, and won't apply everywhere, but in your instance, you were basically working on a live project. An important point, which I'm sort of trying to get out of all of this discussion, is you're not just sat, you're not just sent to a desk and told to get on with something. There's a team around you, there's mentors, there's managers, there's coaches, there's colleagues, there's whatever. You've got a whole bunch of, so you're not just hung out to dry effectively, yeah, if I can put it in those sorts of terms. And that's an important point. You're being brought into a situation where they know you're not a medical writer in their terms. So they're going to train and they're going to support, importantly. But in your case, you're put pretty much immediately onto a live project, yeah, which is good and important. But it's not just walk through the door and sit down and start the writing. It's other stuff, and I suspect you must have gone what am I doing voice coaching for? I thought I was going to be a writer, sort of thing, which again touches on something we'll come back to, which is the variety of tasks that come back. Okay, so that's great. That's fantastic. And so, Dani, can I ask the same question to you? Because it will be a little bit different at Ashfield and it will be different in your situation. So just again, not too much, but just a little bit of what happens to you in that first week.
Yeah, so obviously the first week and the first 2 months are all in the sort of the classroom-based training, essentially. So all of the new starters, so say this is pre-COVID, all of the new starters would go into the office, and there's a region within the Macclesfield building that all of the new Allegro starters are, and you're basically embarking on a training program which includes sort of grammar-based training, PowerPoint training, how to write a manuscript, and then after you've done the actual, the lessons itself, then there's the more practical implementation of that, where you get given projects that were live that have been done previously, but obviously it's all internal and it's for the purposes of training within that 2 months. And obviously the idea is you build up that experience and with writing a manuscript or doing a poster or developing a slide deck without the I guess the added pressure of it being a live project. That's the main thing really with the 2 months.
And again, just follow that through slightly, so make sure I'm understanding this correctly and simplifying. But that 8-week program is the training program. You then get put into an agency or a business group. At that point, are you fairly immediately then working on live projects, as it were, with the support around you and so on? But is that the sort of stages? Yeah,
exactly. So after the 2 months, you go into your agency, and then you start doing the live work as well. But obviously the one thing that some new starters have is that because of that 2 months, they're worried that people are going to expect them to be sort of an expert, essentially. Yeah. But everyone's still treated as a new starter, and 2 months isn't a long time in this job, really. Like I said before, I've been here for over 3 years, and I'm still doing completely new things. Things now.
Okay, cool, excellent. Okay, let's just move on a little bit. So we've got you in, we've got you trained up to a point at any rate, although you never finish learning and all the rest of it. Just both of you, give us a flavour of what I'm really interested in is, give me an idea of what you're actually doing on a day-to-day basis. Dani, I'm going to start with you, but just talk a little bit about actual projects that you work on. I'm trying to understand what you're doing and who you're reacting with around you. How do we make a project happen? What does a project mean? What do you do? So let me not put words into your mouth. Run with that for a little bit. Say a few words about what you're doing.
Yeah. So I guess most people that are going into that, are looking into medcoms and medical writing, will at least have an understanding of the publication side. That's probably what they'll go in with their base understanding in terms of manuscripts and posters and abstracts. So I'm on a different side of medcoms, which is mostly medical affairs. So the main thing that I do, again, sort of in a pre-COVID world, is meetings-based deliverables. So either at big congresses, so I specifically work on an oncology account. So there's ASCO and ESMO. There will be things like a symposium, which is a pharmacological funded meeting where they're focusing on a specific topic, and they'll have a slot within that session where we'll talk about something that's of strategic interest to them, and our role would be to assist with the development of the agenda and the slides. In terms of other medical affairs based stuff, I do quite a lot of training materials as well, so internal and external training materials. So again, that mostly comes in the form of slide decks, but in the sort of technological world, we're kind of looking into new ways of presenting information that sort of goes beyond a PowerPoint or just sort of a standard infographic or PDF or something. So that side of it's really, really interesting, because obviously there's the training where you have to understand and communicate the science, but in kind of a different way, whether it's to someone who is new to the topic in one area. Sometimes it can be a lay summary. Other times it can be developing something that's targeted at a world-renowned expert. So that's obviously a completely different audience as well. So that's the majority of what I do is the meetings side of things.
So I'm again paraphrasing slightly, but you know, lots of variety sort of comes through from that, yeah, which is something that attracts a lot of people, yeah, and actually, you're not just sitting there writing. I'm making that point again, but you're not just sitting at a desk writing. There's quite a lot of liaison with people, project management, and so on. And you're working directly with the clients.
Yeah, directly with multiple clients. Just with the work that we do, there's various different therapy areas on the account. So yeah, so some people can work with one or two clients on a single therapy area, but as I say, just given the account that I work on, I think there's over 20 clients that we can work with.
Okay, and I guess the point I'm trying to make there is, again, I'm constantly emphasizing the fact that agencies are different, right? But so in agency and indeed in your agency, you've got project manager, account manager, client services types, as well as writers. There are agencies where there can be quite a siloed approach, and the account managers or whatever talk to the clients, and then the writers tend not to. Although these days that's breaking down a lot, but there are other agencies, and I think yours is one where the writers are encouraged to talk directly to the clients, and so again, it's just trying to draw out some differences there. But client contact, client facing activity is one of the points to think about as a writer coming into this business, and you will find there are differences across the agency. So it's one of the things to maybe talk about in an interview and so on, if I'm making sense there, yeah. But that's great. So there's a variety of project work going on there of different shapes and sizes and formats and audiences and so on. Cassie, can I come to you? Just again, give us a flavour of the sort of work you actually do now.
Yeah, of course. So I do a lot of work in real world evidence. So when we think about clinical research that goes into new or existing drugs, we think a lot about pivotal trials, so clinical trials, phase 2 trials, things like that, where you have a very controlled population of people which you follow, and you're looking at the efficacy of the drug. But often in the real world, how good a drug is depends on so many different factors, and that's where real world evidence comes in. So traditional real world evidence studies might be after launch, seeing how looking at the effectiveness of the drug in a real world population. So in maybe older populations, in a more diverse population. And so what we do is we help our clients to figure out and enable their strategy for real world evidence. So real world evidence is important kind of across the whole of the product life cycle, because at the beginning you need to really understand what the patient journey is like, what are the existing treatments about, and you might look at electronic health records, for example, and then towards the end you might look at how you might look at sort of the side effects or what it's like for the patient taking your particular product. So there's a lot of potential studies to be run, and it's really important that it's done in an efficient way to enable strategy and there's no duplication. So we help our clients to get clearer on what their strategy is, and to make sure that they have good plans for their real world evidence, so that they can deliver evidence for their stakeholders, because they'll need to convince payers to reimburse their drugs. Cost effectiveness research is really important. They need to convince regulators that the drug is safe and effective. And they also need to convince doctors, nurses, patients about that their drug is good as well. So that's what we do. We run workshops, we visualize data so people can see where the gaps are. And we do a lot of bringing people together, bringing together experts and synthesizing what different experts are saying, what different needs are, and trying to get people to form one clear pathway where everyone can agree on what the path is for delivering the best sort of plan for real world evidence.
Okay, and so as a writer, what are the deliverables? I know there's more to it than just writing, but just give us an example of something you write. You're the writer. What do you write? Is there a publication or a?
An example of that would be a slide deck for a meeting. So we would we'd synthesize what the different stakeholders need, and we write that on a slide, and we try to try to really condense a lot of complicated information and present that in a way where people can easily digest it and easily kind of come to their own conclusions on it. So that's one example of a deliverable that we do. We'd also create data visualizations as well. So we kind of bring together all of their data in maybe an Excel spreadsheet and then figure out how to visualize that. So it's really clear where, where they need to kind of carry on with their real world evidence planning.
Okay. Again, from both of you, I think we're getting a message that you're not sitting writing a manuscript in the way that some people just assume you are. There's, it's writing, people need to understand that sort of breadth of and the sorts of work that involved. Because writing an invite or writing a blog or writing a manuscript or writing a slide set, and there's lots and lots of slide sets being generated, or putting the content together for a meeting and writing the program. There's lots of writing involved in all those things, and writers specialize in work, but it's not as simple as I think some people think from the outside, which is you're sat at a desk and you're writing a manuscript. Katrina's asked, let's see whether we can address this one, and both of you maybe have a few words on this. I think basically she's talking about publication, or she's basically talking about manuscripts and publications, but just take that as the basis. What's the difference? What are the differences? Can you start with the differences between writing this sort of stuff versus writing your thesis? And she's asking specifically, are you expected to write discussion style content and interpret the data? And I think there's an important question that she's getting at there, which I'll not put in words into your mouth again, but can you talk a little bit to that comment? I'm going to bounce back to you, Dani, for a moment. Can you talk a bit about that? What's the difference? Do you see what she's getting at there?
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting question, because there's a definite differentiation between, like you say, writing a thesis or writing an essay in university to writing a manuscript or doing a slide deck. So obviously one thing to consider is, obviously we're working for a pharmaceutical company and they have their own strategic objectives. They have their own reason for why they're doing this manuscript, or they're doing this training, or doing this slide deck. So you always have to be considerate of what that is and the reason behind they're doing it. So say, they have a big phase 3 trial reading out sometime soon, and you're obviously going to give some background information on the drug and maybe the phase 1 and phase 2 data, and then leading to the upcoming data release. Whereas obviously for a thesis, it's mostly just you, and you do your own research, and you're including sort of as much as you can. I guess the second thing to consider is, obviously, because we are working for a client, most of what we do is budgeted and somewhat can be time restricted in a lot of cases. So with a thesis, you obviously have quite a lot of time to do as much reading as you want, really. Whereas sometimes in medical writing, you are a bit limited, and you have to try and streamline and find the key points as quickly as possible, really, rather than doing extensive reading around a topic.
So again, I'm trying to simplify things a little bit, but is it fair to say one of the differences that people talk about is, in academia, you are interpreting your own data, you are the author of your own paper, you are going to stand up and be accountable for your conclusions. Whereas what you're tending to do is take information from other people, maybe literally, well, maybe the data, the conclusions or whatever, and your job is to write that and communicate appropriately to the audience. So you're not going to be, almost certainly not going to be an author. Your name may never appear. You're not really being expected to make the conclusions out of the data, because someone's already done that. Your job is to take it and professionally and in a specialist way communicate and present it to the right audience in the right way. You're both nodding, so that's great. Cassie, you're agreeing with me, yeah? Okay, so I think there's an important point in there, which I guess everyone's just agreeing with. So let's just perhaps leave it like that, can we? What I was going to then go on to was, maybe you've touched on a little bit, and maybe Cassie can pick up on this. And there's a couple of questions coming in about work-life balance and deadlines and fast-paced style, and how to, just talk a little bit about that aspect of the work, which is important. You can't just sit there for the next 6 months and think about stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
Cassie,
that was one of the things that really struck me straight away when I first worked for PharmaGenesis, is kind of the fast-paced nature, but also the fact that everybody is kind of on board at the same sort of level as well. So if you find your workloads kind of piling up, there are other people in your team who you can talk to about it, you can brief them on it. It's a shared it's a shared project basically, whereas maybe in academia things move at a slower pace, but it's all kind of more on you because no one else is really going to do that piece of lab work or write up your results, whereas you can definitely share your workload a lot more. So I think in industry, and it is quite fast paced. I think the work-life balance I find works really well for me. I don't work late that often. I think one of the main things that prompts me to work late maybe is if I'm working with a client who's working in a different time zone and they need something urgently. But most of the time, because we have project managers are basically a godsend, because they look at how much time you have available, they look at the work that's available, and they try and make sure that you have an amount that you can handle and spread things out. So yeah, that's my bit on work-life balance.
Okay, and we can't get away from the fact that if a conference is happening next week, it's happening next week.
Yeah.
And the deadline might be tonight, and if it's not, if you know, you've just got to get it in, sort of thing. So I think people have to understand that the business we're in, which you know, it can be intensive and hard work and all the rest of it, but I don't think there are many sweat factories out there as maybe they would be called in the old days. But you know, if you have a deadline coming up, you have to meet it, and that's part of the deal, is that we all know that. Yeah. Okay, so just I'm doing my usual and running over time here a little bit because I'm just enjoying the conversation, but we've touched on, we haven't actually touched on the fact that we're talking in March 2021, we're coming out of lockdown, we've all been working at home, things have changed dramatically in the last year. Dani, you have touched on a little bit in terms of saying the virtualization, if I can use that word, of congresses and so on and so forth. Just as a moment from each of you, things have changed a lot. Virtual activity, congresses, you know, you're not doing the traveling that we used to talk about, you know, but if anything, the workload's dramatically increased. A moment, Dani, and then Cassie, just for a reflection on the last year.
Yeah, I mean, it is, from my side, it's been an interesting year being primarily meetings based. So from March and April, obviously everything from March and April last year, everything was cancelled, and the clients just didn't really know what to do themselves, to be honest. And that was really on us, really, to try and find these virtual solutions, really. And since then, you know, the virtual nature of work. So we've done a couple of webinars and online training exercises. We've also done just some fun kind of interactive quizzes that are internally facing within a pharmaceutical company to keep MSLs engaged whilst working at home. So it's definitely challenged our way of thinking and trying to do things differently. And I think now, as you know, the world hopefully starts to open up again slowly, I think those things that we have started to implement will carry on into the new world. So I think clients are now seeing the advantages of virtual meetings. I don't think face-to-face meetings are going to disappear entirely, because they have their own huge advantages as well. But I think it's kind of, in terms of medcoms, it's led to sort of pushed to the next level, really, of tech advancement, I guess, as you say, digitalizing and trying to find new ways of doing things that aren't just in PowerPoint and slides.
Yeah. Okay. And just picking up on that point, and Cassie, you know, that we would have a year and a half ago or something, we'd have been talking about all the travel you do. You're traveling to meeting congresses, client offices, also. You haven't for the last year, really. And Dani's saying it's unlikely that it's stopped altogether. However, there's going to be a new balance, isn't there? I mean, how do you feel about that? Are you desperate to go back on the planes and trains and automobiles, or are you actually quite enjoying the sort of the more virtual world and dealing with people on Zoom or whatever it is? Yeah. So Cassie, I'm looking to you just as a final comment there.
Yeah, no worries.
How do you find things?
So to be honest, since I started as an associate medical writer, I've been mainly working from home because I started in February last year. And as an intern,
of course, yeah, okay,
have that many opportunities to go traveling, but it's worked really well for me actually. And I feel like the connections with my teammates is pretty seamless using Microsoft Teams. I am being back in the office though.
Yeah, no, okay. So that was an unfair question, Cassie, because I'd lost the fact that you've really only been working in medcoms during lockdown anyway. So it's probably a fairer question to throw at Dani, because like, Dani, you've got a longer experience and you would have been traveling before. So anyway, okay, slightly unfair question. We could go on for much longer, but perhaps better before I start throwing too many more stupid questions at you that we stop there. Okay, so look, for the purpose of the recording, I think it's just, I love these conversations because it's just, you can hear in what you're talking about, you can hear the differences, you can hear the creativity, you can hear the breadth of project work, you can hear the fun and the excitement that people have in medcoms, which is important, and an important message to get over to people, which you both talked about, is that your companies, but medcoms companies generally, are recruiting people actively at the moment. I keep saying medcoms is open for business, it's booming basically. So for the purposes of the recording, what I'd like to do is say a huge thank you to you, and to wrap it up there. To the audience members today, don't run away, because we've still got 10 minutes or so. We can cover off some of these other questions and they're still coming in. But for the recording, I'd like to say a huge thank you to both Cassie and Dani. I know you're very happy for people to reach out to you via LinkedIn. That's the easy way of doing it. If anybody's watching this and wondering what else is going on, medcommsnetworking.com, loads of stuff and details of what's coming up. FirstMedCommsJob.com has loads of resource about the business and how to get into the business, and advice and so on, including the careers guides. And thank you guys again, Cassie and Dani, for joining in, and your profiles are in the current March 2021 issue of the Careers Guides for Medical Writers, which is found at FirstMedCommsJob.com. Right, okay, I'm going to say thank you, I'm going to say goodbye. Let's give everyone a little wave, and thank you and have a good day. Cheers, bye.